Well, thanks, Keith. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And I'm just going to take a few minutes to go through the years of developing this profitability and drought resilience and how that drought resilience really paid off last year. So, how many of you remember when they were building Interstate 80 across Nebraska? Well, there's a few people here. I don't want to comment on that. I was afraid we'd have a very youthful crowd that wear that. But in Agronomy 101 in 1971, Dr. Dale Flowerday was a professor, and he taking some photographs of them finishing up the interstate out in western Nebraska. And he put a slide up on the screen, and it was a picture of a river and a disc. And he explained that they were using those tools to break down the soil structure, get the air out of the soil so it would collapse, and shed water to make a good road bed. And then he put another slide up, and it was in a cornfield. And there was a ripper and a disc. And they were fluffing up the soil to prepare for planting. And he concluded that that tillage equipment does one of those jobs incredibly well, but not both of them. So fast forward a little bit here to 1993, and Ray Ward was telling me about a meeting in Kansas that we traveled down to. And I remember it was out at a farmstead, and we were underneath this great big shade tree, and there was a small group of guys there, and Matt Hagney was holding court, and he was talking about the 750 John Deere no-till drill, and they had a 7,000 planter there. And he was talking about no-till, and he said you can plant, spray, and combine. Well, that group went on to form no-till on the plains, and I headed home and thought about no-till. And in 1994, I had a full-time off-farm job, I guess you can call it, and I was thinking how no-till, had an efficiency to it. And I had time to plant, and I love to plant. I had the ag retailer could spray, and then I could have the crop custom harvested by a couple of different neighbors. And by doing that, I realized a $100 excess profit over cash renting the land out. And that excess profit over the years has cascaded and compounded forward and has developed into its own enterprise. In 2005, I hired an intern at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and then he went on down to Kansas State to do his master's degree, and he did his master thesis on cover crops, which I'd never heard of. And he went out to western Kansas, northwest Kansas, and into a wheat fallow field, and in the fallow area, he planted a set of cover crops, and then he went over into the wheat stubble that had been sprayed out, planted the same cover crops. I remember, looking at it, and then I looked at the data, and that fallow ground that had nothing planted in it, and that would be your typical fallow. It didn't work, and it's just been sitting there for a year, rain coming down on it, nothing taking up the moisture. Well, that plot had the least amount of soil moisture. And then over here in the area where the cover crops were growing, that soil had the highest level of moisture. And that made absolutely no sense to me at all. But I knew what I was looking at, and I believed the data, so I began using cover crops. I also began experimenting a bit with nitrogen rates on corn, and one of the things I noticed is that the amount of nitrogen that I applied and the yield of the corn is really not very closely correlated, and that seemed pretty interesting. In 2017, I was out at the Webster County Fairgrounds at a green cover event and was listening to Dr. Christine Jones, And she was talking about the nitrogen and phosphorus paradox. And what I heard her say was that if you have high biological activity in your soil, it is mineralizing nutrients and making them available to the crop. And probably didn't need phosphorus applied, it didn't need a whole lot of nitrogen. So I just cut out the phosphorus and really cut back on nitrogen. On the bottom of the slide here, I again just have a footnote. Dr. Kelsey Grisham, that would be a name that I would encourage anyone to search online. She's done quite a bit of research with the radioactive isotope N15, and it attaches itself to the synthetic nitrogen, and then she could trace that nitrogen uptake through the corn plant. And it's very, very interesting. If you're buying nitrogen, it would be worth your time to check her out. In February of 2020, I was in Texas, and like everyone here, I'm curious. I'm always looking for new information and new way to do things. And I had an opportunity to be with Dr. Rick Haney. And Dr. Haney had developed a biological soil test. And he claimed that by measuring the amount of microbial activity in the soil, he could predict how much nutrient that they would make available for the subsequent crop, especially nitrogen. So I read the test, and the recommendation came back that for my dryland corn, with 150 bushel yield objective, I needed to apply 25 pounds of nitrogen. Well, I was putting on more nitrogen than that with the herbicide burn down to help you with the burn down. So went with that. I did look back the other day, and my nitrogen that year on that field was $14. And I was on the edge of my seat that whole summer, and thinking I could have a train wreck. I was sending tissue samples out to the Ward labs because I thought if this thing's going to fold up, I kind of want to have a little advance notice. And I told Ray that if it did fold up, I was going to put a Ward lab sign out on the highway in the front. But that fall, it exceeded the yield objective a little bit. It was equal in yield to one of my neighbors and was a little bit above the average for the neighborhood. So that had me pretty well convinced. Well, enough of that over the years journey there. Shifting gears a little bit to look at 2023. And I assume we have some Nebraska volleyball fans here. And they had a good year in 2023, played for the national championship. And I listened to a lot of the games on the radio, and John Baylor is the play-by-play announcer. And he has a sign-off line that he uses at the end of every broadcast, which is my job to report what I saw. So I'm going to do a John Baylor here and report what I saw in 2023, specifically on my soybean fields. And I did not pick for the national championship like the volleyball team did. In fact, last year were the lowest yielding soybeans that I have raised in 30 years. So not a real pretty sight. But beginning with the end in mind, these are couple of photos I took at the last fall, and of course the one was in the winter. And it was a pretty difficult year for non-irrigated crops in my area. We just had an extreme drought area, and there were a lot of non-irrigated fields not harvested. There were some the combine went through for insurance reasons only, and 0 to 10 pretty well caught the non-irrigated soil. What I like to do is plant soybeans in May, and I plant a 3.5 Group B, which is a pretty full season variety for my area. And the idea is I'd like to have them vegetative, if possible, late in August and in September to be able to take advantage of any late season moisture that we get. I also like to plant into a lot of biomass, and this photo was not taken last year. This was from the spring of 2021, and that's what I like to plant into. And It really helps with weed suppression, and it shades the ground and keeps the soil cooler until the soybeans have a chance to canopy. Dr. Aaron Silva up at the University of Wisconsin's done a lot of work with using biomass to help with weed suppression. And in her work, she really likes to roller crimp it, lay it down. I think Mitchell had a photo from his farm of doing that. And that has a lot of great attributes to lay that down. However, we're in Nebraska, we get a lot of wind. I'd like to leave it stand and get some wind protection. And this is that same field in spring of 2021, and I was out there on a day when the wind must have been blowing at least 100 miles an hour. Why we just waving to and fro. We'd look down at the corn that was at V3, and it was barely affected by the wind. This is a soil health assessment or a biological soil test, and there's, I won't go into a whole lot of detail here. I'm going to point out 4 things that I pay attention to. Good share. And one is the organic matter, and every field that I purchased was below 2 on organic matter when I purchased it, and on the average, I doubled that out, so I feel good about it. This is one of the better fields. It's 4.7. This whole area down in here, there's a lot of data there, and if you look in the Soil Health Resource Guide on page 32, 33, it deciphers what all of that means. But generally what it means to me is I have very high microbial activity going on, and they're eating a lot of carbon, and so I need to be feeding a lot of carbon through my row crops as well as my cover crops. And then I think I mentioned earlier that I quit putting on phosphorus a number of years ago, and so I keep my eye on that phosphorus level, and it has remained the same, and in a couple of fields has gone up slightly. And then the big number I look at down here, that water-soluble aggregate score, and that 80 is a pretty high score. And one of the things that it indicates is the ability of the soil to infiltrate water. And on this particular field, it would be pretty unusual to get a rainfall event that it would not be able to completely infiltrate. Oh, it's just still. That would. Okay, in our area, the 30-year average precipitation is 27.4 inches. However, we've been in a 4-year extreme drought. It has had a cascading, compounding impact. In 2020, it was dry. 2021, it was wet during planting season, and then just shut off and got very little moisture after that. In 2022, it was dry. However, most of the moisture came in May, June, July. How about that? And then it was dry all fall. It was dry through the winter. It was dry the spring of 23, and it was dry the entire year, 13.9 inches. And half of that came real late in the season. This is a photo that I took toward the end of April, and I'm wondering, is it too dry to even grow rye? That was on April 19th, but I dug down into the field and down in that 2-inch zone where I'm going to be placing the seed. I had nice moisture, and I was thinking back to my intern back in 2008 and his cover crop plots that he had out there in northwestern Kansas, and he had the most moisture in that field underneath the cover crop. This is a photo of planting on May 4th, and it went in nice. It was dry on top. It was moist at that 2 to 3 inch level. I was putting the soybeans in right at 2 inches. Now, residue reasonably adequate. The standing biomass, not a whole lot there, but boy, did it ever plant nice. Didn't run much down pressure at all. However, it remained dry. And on May 19th, I'm wondering, are they going to make it? If you look really, really close, and look real close, you can see just a little bit of green where the soybeans are starting to pull through. 21 days after planting, soybeans are emerged. The stand is there. But look at that cereal rye. I had sprayed the herbicide 2 days after planting, and the cereal rye still green. So, you know, was it too dry for the rye to die? Okay, June 6th, a couple things went through my mind. The first one was, I don't think I'm going to have canopy for the summer solstice. And the second one was the beans have a nice deep green color to them. I like that. They're a little bit wilty if you look close. And they're snugged in there pretty good in that 30-inch row. And I've been planting 125,000 population for quite a few years. And I have a couple of friends, I call them the big yield guys, and because they had won state yield contests in the states where they live, and they're always getting in my ear saying, man, you got to get that population down to 100,000 if you're serious about raising soybeans. So maybe this year. 4th of July, we'd had 2.4 inches precipitation year to date, and that comes in front of a dry winter, fall, you know, basically 2 years of being very, very dry. Soil probe went in 24 inches, and then boom, it just like hit that dry dirt, and that was it. The good news is that tomorrow it's going to rain 1.4 inches. I planted enlist soybeans the last 5 years, and every year I take this photo, and that's enlist soybeans living in a dicamba cloud. And people always say, boy, is that really going to hurt your yield? And I don't really think that it has over, you know, the past 5 years. Now, here's those same soybeans, the 1st of August, and there's no dicamba damage in there that I can see. But what I can see is that they've canopied the row. They're dark green, they're robust, and they're healthy. And I don't understand why. Because we have not had enough moisture the last 2 years, in my opinion, to even keep a soybean plant alive. So I'm just, I don't know how many people, you know, I just tell them I don't know what's going on out there. And then I was reading in the Soil Health Resource Guide, on page 20, article written by Willie Patoris, and one of the things he mentioned in there is that the mycorrhizal fungi can access moisture that is not available directly to the plant root. And I thought, well, you know, he might be onto something. So that same day, I was able to push the soil probe in 36 inches, and I was a little shocked at how easy it went in. I had to walk a few fields to keep checking that out because I was a little surprised that I was able to get that soil probe in, but I was. Now here we are at the end of August, and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the thing we had this year were 3 different times during the summer when we had 5 days back to back where it went to 100 degrees. And man, those crops, they were just really willed up. You can just see it over the top of these soybeans. They are just laid over and just wilted. You know, every time I think, man, is this, you know, they're going to give it up. You know, this could be their last day. But they did hang in. And the next day we got a 3.5-inch rain. And soil probe went down 36 inches, and the soil on the tip of that probe was very wet, so it's obvious there was good moisture down below the 3-foot zone. And, you know, people always, you know, that say, well, how much rain did you get? Well, I definitely got it all. And that was due to that good infiltration ability of the soil. I'm going to just go back, back up one here. This was the end of August, and I have to say the dryland crops around there were toast, and with some corner of a pivot or just a dryland field. And there were some fields just took a few miles west of me that had already been worked. And, you know, guys were, you know, thinking about planting wheat later in the fall. And so I'm just very grateful that those soybeans were, you know, staying green and they were vegetative. And we're able to take advantage of that 3.5-inch rain. And we had 2 more rain events in September, about an inch apiece, and that moisture all put together really took those soybeans from being BBs to being a decent-sized soybean. So here they are on September 19th, they're starting to turn, and October 4th, they're dropping the leaves, and then on October 23rd, they were ready to harvest. Had a couple places where we hit a little bit of green stem, but other than that, they did harvest beautifully, and it grows $500 an acre. Now, that's nothing to write home about. However, it sure did beat not harvesting soybeans. And for me, that is a profitable level. And that was with no fertilizer, no insecticide, no fungicide, no tillage, no insurance, no debt. And so it worked pretty good.
So,
One of the things I've learned over the years is that I must be present to win. And there's always been an abundance of information available, and there is more information available, today than there has ever been. And all I have to do is show up and then soak it up. And just like this morning, I can't believe how much I learned this morning, and also can't believe how much I learned from 4 individuals who I captured in a photograph last summer at an event. And those are guys that over the years, they talked about this is all a systems approach. There's no silver bullet. Everything cascades and compounds over time for either the better or for the worse. Always carry a shovel and a soil probe because everything I need to know is really going on at the ground. Thank you, and back to you, Keith. Well,